What's up, Russell? How we doing today?
Hey, Chris, what's going on, buddy?
Too much. I'm definitely excited about today's little chat. We have,
Me too.
this concept of context engineering versus vibe coding. I know there's this like super debate that's kind of going on right now. What have you heard?
Yeah, I there's a huge debate, and I think vibe coding is this big term that everyone's just been talking about. And you know, to me, it seems like there's just some vagueness in what is vibe coding, what is context engineering, what does it all mean? Like, how do I get these vibes, right? These vibes that everyone has. How do I do this? So, yeah, I mean, there's a big debate. Like, should we be vibe coding? Should we be doing old school engineering and coding? Should we be context engineering? What do you
No, I
think?
mean, I think there's so many different routes of it. And one side you're gonna have, of course, like the purists that are like, you can, if you're
Mhm.
doing AI coding, you're cheating. Like, you're not really an engineer, you're just a wannabe. And then you have the other people who are like just chill and making apps and deleting their entire databases, on accident and stuff, which is
Yes,
something we'll probably talk about later for sure.
definitely. I know somebody here who is a purist for a little bit. His name
I
starts with a
was.
C and ends with a Riss.
I was. I really
Chris.
was. There was this feeling for a very long time where I was like, I need to become more of a purist and just completely reject any AI coding, because if I ever had to like, look for another job or, do something else, like they would look down on me almost if
Yeah.
I didn't know like how the compiler works super deep down. But now I don't know if you read that Coinbase, the
Hmm.
CEO of Coinbase, literally said he fired like a bunch of engineers because they didn't accept AI coding.
They didn't
I don't
have
know
the
if you read
vibes,
about
bro.
they didn't.
I didn't read it, but I think I saw you posted about that. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Um,
is crazy.
yeah, it is, but it's crazy. So I remember when the two of us met in React Miami, right? We met at this conference, and I had been using Cursor for a little bit before that, a few months, and I remember going to that conference. That like I've been a developer long before that, but I remember going to that conference and feeling a little bit scared of how other developers. First of all, it was like a conference, you were meeting all these other developers who are like super skilled and everything, so there was some fear there already, like imposter syndrome. But I felt more because I was like, how do other people feel about vibe coding, about using Cursor and things like that? And I was really actually surprised a bit, because that was one of the things that I made it a point to talk to people about. Because I've done a lot of different things in my life. I've done SEO, I've been involved in crypto, I've been involved in a lot of different things. And every time there's this new innovation, it seems like there's, the purists, like people who are like, no, you can't like do SEO that way, or you can't be into crypto. That's not money or whatever. Right. And then there's the people who are like early adopters. And it always seems like the early adopters have the best payoff, right? Like they have, like if you bought, let's just say you bought Bitcoin in 2010, right? You have a
Yeah.
very high likelihood of being really wealthy right now because you're an early adopter, and it's not because you necessarily knew something, but you're willing to take a risk on something, and you saw
Right.
the potential, right? And I felt that way with vibe coding with Cursor at the time, because I was like, hey, it's I was just like blown away by what Cursor could do when I first saw it. And and I was like, you know what? If I don't do this, somebody else is, right? And
It's
there
a
was
good
like this
point.
part of me, right? There's this part of me that was the purist. Like I think you have this too, had this too, where you were like, well, if I do this, I'm not a developer anymore,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And but then
No.
I was like, you know what? If I don't do it, somebody else is, and then they have this advantage on me. And I was like, I might as well just give it a shot. And so when I went to the conference, I really thought like very few people would be using Cursor, or would even consider it. They would be like almost anti. And I was blown away. I was really surprised by how many people I talked to who were like, "Yeah, I use it." Like, not everyone was what I would consider a power user, which I think you are now, Chris. Like, I think
I'm
you've
a psycho
fully
user.
converted. Yeah, like I've seen Chris with 4 windows open of Cursor like all at the same time. So I know
Yeah.
you're definitely a power user now, but I was surprised by how much people did adopt it, but they weren't fully in it yet. But I think that's changed a little bit, and you know, I think to go back to today's topic, I think the idea of vibe coding has changed fundamentally at this point. I think in the
It
beginning it
has.
was like, yeah, like I think in the beginning it was like, okay, I'm gonna pull up Cursor and say like, build me a, I don't know, like toilet toilet review app or something. I don't know. Right?
Pretty much
And
just
then
trying to
like,
one shot it, basically, is what
yeah,
you're
like
saying.
one shotting like, hey, build me this app, and then
An
just
entire
sort of
app.
an entire app, and then people would just be satisfied with what came out, right? You're like, oh, that's better than I can do because I'm not a developer, right? That was sort of the
That's very
idea. Is
true.
like the idea of vibe coding came out of the non-technical development community, like people who are building apps using Squarespace or WordPress or things like that, where it's like low code or no code. That's where I personally sort of came from, and that's how I learned to code. Is I was in SEO for a while, and I was building websites with WordPress and Squarespace, and then I was like, I actually want to learn the technical side of this, how to actually do this instead
The
of like
actual
drag
code.
and drop it. Yeah, and yeah, so I think, but I think at this point, like, and you tell me what your opinion is, because I'm curious. Like, I think vibe coding has changed fundamentally in its meaning over the past like 6 months, and there's certainly like people who still vibe code, but I think we're leaning more towards context engineering. What do you think?
Yeah, I really think so. And I would probably say one of the reasons, just to circle up on it a little bit last, the main reason why I was so anti, because I was afraid if I started vibe coding, Primogen would just kick down my door
Dude,
and
that was
just
one
hit
of
me
the
with the
first
keyboard.
things. Yeah, that was one of the first things I was like, oh, like, you know how you like put people on a pedestal and you like
Yep.
idealize, like you're like, oh,
Yep.
Primogen is like definitely the best developer there is, and whatever he
Yeah.
says is like the way to go. And
Gold.
I remember when I first got into Cursor, like, oh, I don't know, like a week later, so, or maybe it was like right after React Miami, I think it was actually like a week after that, he put out this video where he was like, if you're a vibe coder, like you're cheating, this is
Right.
BS. Like he just trash talk vibe
Exactly.
coding. I was like, whoa, maybe I need to like recheck my like,
Rethink my life.
yeah, like my decisions in life. But then again, like that's, it's this. I've just seen this pattern frequently because I've been associated with a lot of these sort of fringe or like early adoption things, like I said, like SEO back in the day, and then cryptocurrency. Like there's always like big outspoken people who are like thought leaders who are very
Mm.
anti for a long time. And it's just because people get ingrained in what they know, right?
It's like
And
a security blanket. At the end of the day, it's like a
it,
security blanket.
it,
You know what you know, and you're good at it. And especially if you've been doing it for a long time, you're good at it. You have your routine. It's worked in some capacity. So you're just gonna stick
yeah,
with it. And if anything new comes away, then you're all of a sudden get knocked down to the bottom of the totem pole, right? So
exactly. Yeah. And so I think, I, I will say this though too, right? Is while we're calling out Primogen for being anti vibe coding, he had a good point, right? Like he did,
yes,
and that is that uh, this thing we call vibe coding, which I think at this point we should sort of define what it means. But
yeah,
you want to try to give it a shot of what your
yeah.
definition of vibe coding is?
And I was a little bit late to the party when it came to like the true vibe coding, but if we look back at it, it was Andre Karpathy who was the co-founder
Mhm.
of OpenAI. I think there was this viral tweet, and now it's become like the whole movement, right? I think there's even a
Mhm.
Wikipedia page about it, right? And
Yep.
it comes down to I don't even think you type. You just literally turn on
Just
the
speak.
microphone and you just speak to the code editor, like to Cursor, and you just explain what you want. You just express it. Like, obviously, if you're a little bit more technical, it works out a little bit better, but you just explain to it. So, and then that's it. Like, you let AI do all the work pretty much, and that's really it. And I mean, it is amazing. Like, since I think it was February that came out, since then, I mean, you have all of these IDs. You have Lovable, Replit, which, I think they were maybe before then, but have become popular. You have people now, which I don't know. I want to get your opinion on it. They're claiming like, oh, I have $100,000 SaaS app that I built with 30 minutes with Cursor, right? Or $1 million ARR, and all this stuff. And it's like, I'm not technical. I know I built it all with Lovable or whatever it might be. It could be very true, but that in the core is the heart of vibe coding. Just a non-technical person speaking and just describing in words what they want and have an AI build it.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. And I think it's what you're saying is, I think it's definitely possible that people have vibe coded an app and maybe have $100 million app out of it. I don't think it's, a common thing. Right. I forget what it's called, like survivorship bias or something, where you hear these, they came from like, I think World War I or World War II, where they were like, these planes that would come back from fighting in the war and they'd be riddled with bullets, and they were like trying to figure out how to better, like protect these planes. And so the whole premise is like, basically you look for all the places they weren't shot instead of where they were to add armor, because the planes that came back actually made it, right? So they could continue flying. So the whole point of that is, the survivorship bias is like, you see these people who are like, oh yeah, I made $100 million app, but like, you don't hear about this 100 million other people who've tried using Cursor unsuccessfully multiple times, right? You just hear about the one guy who built an app that's like worth so much that he spent 30 minutes on, which honestly, I think anybody who's claiming that's a load of BS, or it's manipulated how they're claiming 30 minutes, because Cursor itself can't even really build like a full homepage for an app in 30 minutes. Like, you just can't.
Like a production ready.
Yeah, like you can't. And to get back to the point, I think this is where Primeagen was so right on this topic, right? Which is, he's like, look, yes, you can do this. Like, you can clearly, use Cursor. Like, it's obvious. Anybody can download Cursor and see, yeah, you can make a homepage. I mean, that's what got me blown away, was like, the first thing I ever did with Cursor was I asked it to build the Snake game, right? Like,
okay.
And it did it in like 5 minutes, like perfectly. And I was like, dang, like that's pretty impressive, right? That would take me a while to do. So, it's impressive. But the problem is that, and I think this is the big issue with vibe coding and why people are moving away from pure vibes, is that, yes, you can do that, but then you lose the understanding, right? And at the end of the day, your software is only as good as the understanding that the developers have of it, because software doesn't exist as a one-shot thing. It's an evolution, right? And, I have a separate group where I coach and mentor like new developers. And one of the things that I see a lot with new developers is they're like, I'm just not that good. I can't ever be that good. Like, look at how amazing this app is and that app is, right? And what they don't realize is that, I did this exercise once and I thought it was really cool. If you go to archive.org or Wayback Machine, the same website, go look at Facebook when it came out, right? Go look at Amazon when it came out.
Yeah.
And I, in our group, I dropped these screenshots, and because a lot of people were getting discouraged, they're like, I just am not that good at designing, or I don't know how to build an app. And I was like, look, this is what Facebook looked like when it came out, right? This is what Amazon looked like. They looked horrible, right?
Yeah.
But that's what software is. It's an evolution. Facebook didn't just pop up one day as what it is today, right? With all the features and all the groups and all the like friends, likes, like all this. it's this back and forth sort of thing. And I think that's the creative part of software that I love so much. And I think you love so much too. And many developers do, is that it's, it's not like it's a fixed thing, right? It's a animate thing, right? It's almost like a living, breathing thing where you build something, you get users to use it, you get feedback, you iterate on that feedback, you build new features, you remove features, and so this is the part of vibe coding that I think is getting lost here, is that people are like, yeah, I built an app that I made X amount of money from and by doing it for 30 minutes. But the problem is, one, you're getting no education. You're not learning anything. It's just natural
no
language.
idea what's going
like
on
you
in
already Yeah, you already know how to speak English. You're not learning how to code. You're not learning any new skill set, and that code is not maintainable. And I think this is the where this misnomer comes from, is that yes, you can build a simple app, right? Vibe coding, and you can a lot of people make simple apps that make them hundreds of millions of dollars. It happens all the time. Just simple things like converting a PDF to some other doc format, or like these little apps can make a ton of money, right?
Little pain points. Yeah.
Little pain points, like a lot of pain, simple apps, right? We did that. Like we built Renew Pick, right? In 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And we have 1,000 users, and we haven't marketed it at all, like literally zero, right?
Yeah.
So
No, exactly.
these apps you can create, and they can sort of grow on their own. But the problem is, if you don't understand what's going on, that app isn't animate. It just exists as it does. And the next time that you need to build or add complexity to it or scale it, it gets very difficult when these apps become complex, right? And so I think there's like truth and a little bit of exaggeration in there. Like, do you agree with that?
I think there's definitely exaggeration. I mean, like you said earlier, I'm a power user. Like, I'll have multiple cursor windows going. I'll have, even Claude code going sometimes on the side too when I run out of tokens for everything else, right? So I go pretty deep into it, and there's a lot of, like, if you're just trying to literally one shot this stuff, and that's how if you're gonna build something in 30 minutes, you gotta one shot most of the features.
Totally, yeah.
It's just not. I mean, it's just not possible, right? It's just not possible.
No, it's not. I think anybody who says I built an app in 30 minutes that's more complex than, a simple input output. I mean, even just like building an app with auth working in it is 30 minutes of time.
Oh,
even
easily.
Vibe coding.
Oh, easily.
So I think there's a lot of exaggeration, and I see this a lot too, and I think this is a weird thing that I've seen in software development, and this is a generalization, right? Because I said before, like, I've done a lot of mentoring with new software developers, and it seems like when you get advanced in software development, I don't think it's every software developer, but there's a subsect of software developers who like to basically just, like, I don't know what the right word is for it, but like scare new software developers into thinking they're not worthy. Right? Like they're like, oh, you don't know C#. Like, you call yourself a software developer and you don't know C#. Like,
there should be a word for it. I know what you're talking about, and it's like and it's almost like in every profession, I would think too. But I think just because there are like the superior languages, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not. It's like, how low of a level of language do you actually know? Like, do you know C?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you able to read machine code? Right. And if you're not, you're not a real developer. Right.
Right.
So
exactly.
I get it. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just think it's interesting because it's this thing where it's like, I see this a lot with new developers where they get discouraged because they're like, oh, these people are light years ahead of me. I'll never be able to get that far. And I think we see that a little bit with vibe coding too, where it's like, us technical developers are kind of like poo-pooing on the non-technical developers and being like, oh, that's not real. I like to see it a different way, which is like, I encourage people to vibe code and to get into this creative, aspect of themselves of like, build something you like, try things out, right? But I think, you know, I think it's a great like entryway into software development. It's a great way for people to actually learn a lot. Like there's this huge benefit of using Cursor because you can not only code these things, but get an understanding. And I saw this a few weeks ago. Somebody posted in like a vibe coding group that I'm part of on Facebook. And they were like, yeah, I've been, learning all this stuff about React and Next.js and Supabase. And it was actually really cool because they're like, I'm building this app. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I've learned so much in this time.
And that's the great way of actually using AI as a tool, or vibe coding as a tool, to help you learn how to program. There is one thing I do want to talk about when it comes to vibe coding, and I think it's something a lot of people don't actually talk about, and it's the dopamine that you get when you are actually like vibe coding. It's almost like when you're able to like have, let's say, a view on the right hand side, you're in your code there on the left, and you can just watch it instantly like build out these functions, build out the hero section, build out the authentication, all this stuff. Like it's like this dopamine that's just like smacking you in the face, right?
Totally. And I think about this a lot because I'm a full stack developer. I know you are too, but I tend towards front end development, and I think you tend towards back end development. And I think the reason I think I always tended towards front end was just, one, I like design, but I feel like you get more of that dopamine like hit over and over because you can like edit one thing and you see like, oh, the line changed instantly, or like the borders change color, right? Whereas back-end coding, like I think you get it, but it's not the same, right? You're like, oh,
you've never seen you've never seen a beautiful SQL query then, where it's like perfectly indented and it's like super performant, there's the memory, there's no memory leaks, like that's peak.
See, but
peak back-end
I think
development.
that's just like a personality thing, right? Like there's just like I think there's like this, I guess, Virgo side of you that's like, I love structure and like things like, right?
Exactly.
And that's the back end side of like, oh, I make this perfect SQL query. Whereas I'm like, I like to see the flowy pictures and
the pretty colors. So let's
the pretty colors.
Let's talk about then. So we have this understanding of vibe coding, right? You're speaking into the vibes, you're just kind of you're pretty much letting AI just do it. You're explaining to it like you're using English or whatever language you speak, and you're just explaining what you want, and AI is doing all the heavy lifting. So as of lately, I want to say it was maybe the past couple months ago, and I think it was even the Shopify CEO came up with this new term. And it's almost like this new iteration of vibe coding, and it's called context engineering. So what do you know off the top of your head about context engineering?
Yeah, so I think, to be concise, I think the premise or the goal of context engineering is to fix all of the cracks in vibe coding, right? All the places where vibe coding fails is what context engineering aims to fix. And I think that's, a lot of what we personally have seen is like, we got into Cursor like everybody else and just sort of tried to go with the vibes. And then when you get to these more complex apps, or you start trying to integrate newer technologies, right? Like you get, like let's say like a new version of Next.js that just came out, and these large language models don't have I forget what the name of it is, but like their context is not like reached up to that point. They start coding the context window, right? Like basically context engineering is trying to build structure around vibe coding so that you can build a dynamic animate app that evolves over time. And we fix like the little bugs of like, my chat window in Cursor just deciding like what color to make something, or what database to use, or right, like we're actually building the structure in before we start coding, so that there's not questions that your LLM is just deciding on its own, right? These hallucinations and questions. And so to me, that's a lot of what it means, is just like coding for longevity instead of coding for like that quick dopamine fix. And you still get that obviously, but like that quick dopamine of like, oh, I'm gonna build
And more
this app
structured.
and yeah, like and it's like, oh, it'll be in production tomorrow. I just started it today, right? Because I think we glanced over this, but like one of the bigger issues with vibe coding too is like security, right? And that's
Oh
that's
yeah.
something that's like
Oh
pretty
yeah.
important with software development, is like, is my app secure? You said this too, like, are there memory leaks, right? Are you just like absolutely just ravaging people's browsers when they use your app,
Right.
or
That is very
like,
true. There's a lot of outside kind of factors that come along with it. And I think this context engineering, it means so many different things to like a lot of different people. Like
Mhm.
you said, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to like planning. And it's
Mhm.
almost following like how a real software development lifecycle in a dev shop kind of works. You will have your product managers, your business analysts that will go and get all of the requirements from the users and figure out and translate that into an epic and then a user story. And then that user story is now taken and given to a developer or a senior dev. They take that user story and they break it down into bite-sized tasks, and then they give it to either mid-level or junior, or they do the work themselves. And that's kind of like the life cycle, and then you iterate, right? So with
Mhm.
context engineering, I think we're starting to, it's, I don't want to say it's the polar opposite of vibe coding, but it kind of is. It's actually planning, right? It's creating this
Yeah.
document, figuring out all the edge cases, not just jumping right into the code and feeling the vibes. You're jumping into the code with a roadmap of how you actually want to code out this project or this feature.
Yeah. I saw a post that you made the other day on LinkedIn, and I think it sort of summed it up for me, and like clarified it a lot, which is, these huge tech companies that we all know, like Google and Microsoft and everything, they spend 10, 15 years developing these processes of creating software, right? And they've perfected this over years of like how to build teams and how to build structure around um, you know, the software that they put out. And when vibe coding came out, basically every like developers who are using AI to code just threw that all to the wind. It was like, nah, forget all this structure and stuff that's made like, the world's best software in the world, like the best software in the world. Let's just speak into a microphone and see what comes out. And then they're like putting that out in production. And so I think that's where context engineering is coming into play now, where people are realizing like, okay, that was fun. Like vibe coding was fun for a little bit, but let's put our like serious hats on again and like,
Right.
go back to how Google and Microsoft and Apple and all these monster companies have developed code, and that is by structure, right? And iteration, and like actually thinking through things as simple as a user story, like, to go out and um, just build an app because you feel like it needs to be out there in the world, or you think it's going to make money or something, without really considering how is somebody going to use this, who is this for, like what is our target audience. We talked about this the other day, we've talked about it with RenewPick too, is like, who is the avatar? Like, who is the person who's going to use this, and what is their life like, and how is this helping them? What is the problem they're trying to solve with this? And I think that's something that, these giant tech companies are so good at doing that it almost goes unseen, right? Because Google and like Microsoft and, there's tons of other ones out there. We can talk about all the FANG companies and everything. They don't just like say, hey, all you engineers who are paying, you know, $200,000 to $500,000 a year, like go build this thing because it seems cool. They're like, let's. They actually do market research and figure out what is a problem that somebody's having. How can we build a solution to that using software? And how is this person going to use it? What is their like, and then they build in more than just like how are they going to use it. They're like, well, okay, we can put software out there, but then how do we market it to them, right? How do we
Right.
talk in the language that they understand, and how do we like make it easy for them to use. Like, for example, in our Renew Pick app, we did this where our avatar was people who were over 40, because we knew that people who wanted to renew old photographs, that's what the app does. It just basically takes an old photograph and makes it look new again. How would they, use this app? And we've realized, like, many of the people who have old black and white photos are going to be older, right? Because
they're not going to be 15 or 20.
Yeah,
they're just not.
Yeah, the 15-year-olds have iPhones, right? So,
right.
So, we knew that also people who are 50, 60, 70 years old are not super tech savvy. So they're not going to be able to like click a bunch of like little, like, I don't know, toggles and decide, oh, I want this. Like, they just need a one button solution. So that's how we built it. And all the language that we use for the content, also, we use context engineering to like tell Cursor, hey, this is the target avatar. And then when it's vibe coding, so on, I guess you could say, it knows who it's building this content for. And so it's not going to speak to the user like they're 15-year-old. It's going to speak to them like they're 50 or 60 and say, like, very clearly, here's a big button to press. Here's how you upload the picture, right? And so I think that's a lot of where context engineering is going, is building these structure, doing the market research, I should say, and then the longevity of the app through architecture and all these different things. I mean, there's so much that goes into context engineering. Like, vibe coding is so simple. It's like I just say a sentence and I get an app out of it. Whereas context engineering is sort of,
it's tougher.
It's sort of like the opposite. Yeah, it's tougher.
One thing that I've been trying to almost like figure out the strategies around, and we've done like a ton of like context and projects together and everything like that, and then we're building this app called Precursor together too, where it's figuring out how to even start, right? With context engineering, it's like trying to figure out, like, where do you plan, like, what is the first document you make? And I think for most people, they would make a product requirements document. And that's kind of the start of this context engineering, right? Like, I don't know if you want to explain a little bit, like, of a product requirement document a little bit and what all kind of goes in there. I know we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, because we've both been going back and forth with this idea of, like, AI is sort of this black box of, like, we put something into it and we get a result out of it. We don't really know everything that's going on behind the scenes, right? And I'm not going to get complex into how AI works, but ultimately that's sort of the idea. It's like, we don't know how it works exactly. It's trained on lots of data, and then we get these outputs from it. And so I've been debating this a lot, and I know we've been going back and forth with this, but, like, what is important and what is not important? What context does AI need to build an app and what it doesn't? And so, to your point, I think a product requirements document is, I would say, essential, because if, like, I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of, again, what we were talking about with, like, Google and Microsoft, is like, when Google goes to, like, build new software, what is the first thing they're going to create? And that's usually a product requirements document, right? And so that's going to outline a lot of sort of like a 30,000 foot overview of what is it that we're building, right? So it's going to be like an overview, like it could, let me start with this, is that there's lots of different iterations of what a PRD or product requirements document
it's kind
is.
of a preference. There's no real like rule or law on exactly what this should contain. We're trying to figure that out, as we kind of iterate what works best, essentially. And there are, like you said, there's different varieties. Some people like to put their tech stack in these product requirement documents. Some people like to do markdown files for the product requirement documents. We, doing our precursor and all of our research, we like to do JSON format, because we've realized that, markdown is more for humans and JSON is more geared for AI and machines, because it's just structured different. Like, unless you're some complete psychopath, you probably don't read Lord of the Rings and JSON, Right. Like,
That's a great idea, dude. They should like rewrite books in JSON format for developers. That would be kind of funny. But no, I think there's another really important point there too, is that, you know, one of the considerations that we have to think about um, with AI development is context windows, and that is like how many tokens a large language model can actually process at a time. And so those are getting bigger and bigger over time, but when you reach a certain number of tokens, and that tokens just means like a portion of a word, essentially, like they break down whatever text you input into tokens, and same with output. When you get to a certain length, it starts cutting off what's at the beginning, right? And so I think that's part of why we've opted to go with JSON as well, is because, you know, a human needs a lot of like filler words, right?
a
And
lot
a
of
lot of
fluff.
filler context. Yeah, a lot of fluff. Like all these, when you look at a book, 90% of that is not the real meat and potatoes of a book. It's just the words like it and the and is and a and right. Um, and a lot of like context that's not essential. Computers don't need all that, right?
Right.
You can give them one word and they interpret that and understand, especially AI, right? Because it understands a lot of other contexts. Like it understands what a PRD is and what it should be expecting in a PRD. And so to go back to your question, basically, you know, there's a lot of options when it comes to PRDs, like what you want to put in it. But ultimately there's, some pretty big ones that you'll see frequently, like what is it that we're building? What's the name of it? What is like an overview of what it does? What are the user stories? So like, you know, in, actually it could be even like, what are the avatars? Like who are the target users? Like who is this person, right? Is it, I don't know, for like our Renew Pick app, it could be like, it could be 40, like we talked about this too, is like it could be somebody who's 40 plus years old who has old photos. It could be like another avatar, could be like their children who's like
Right.
renewing this picture for a special occasion. It could be, and you go through those. And then the user stories are like how they're going to use it, right? Like how is
Yep.
this person going to actually walk through using the app or different features? And then from there, there's like a lot of different options and things that you'll see in a PRD. Like you said, you could have a tech stack in there. You could have like feature
Design
outlines,
system
right?
too. I think I've seen a couple. They
Design
have like
systems.
full design systems and stuff. And I think it's the balance that we're kind of trying to figure out here too, of how much context do we give versus not telling Cursor exactly what to all do, right? Like we don't obviously
Mm-hmm.
want to put code examples in there, because that, at the core of Cursor, and we've talked about this, it's the ability to have the context of the entire project and be able to
Mm-hmm.
come up with solutions and like the code that fits and works alongside of it. So obviously, like, the old way of doing it before Cursor was to go into ChatGPT, ask me to write this function, copy this function, paste it in there into the Visual Studio or whatever
Mm-hmm.
IDE, and then see if it worked without that context. So with these PRDs, it's almost like giving the outlines of these features, giving the outlines of these views,
Yeah.
giving the outlines of the design, what it's going to look like, how it's going to work, what is the user flows that are going to kind of happen, and that's with the user stories. So without almost like cutting Cursor off at the legs, if that kind of makes sense, right? Where you're not telling it
Yeah.
like how to do it, you're telling it kind of what you want to do, and giving it almost like a sandbox to kind of play in with these guardrails is kind of the way that
Yeah.
I think about these PRDs and these context documents. Quick note, with all this talk of context engineering and how important it is, this is exactly why I'm building Precursor. Because here's the thing about context engineering. The biggest challenge isn't understanding the concept, it's actually implementing it. You need to create comprehensive context documents that give AI systems everything they need to work efficiently with your code base. But most developers don't know how to either structure these documents, or they will spend hours manually creating them, only to have them get out of sync with their code base or not even be the right feature that they wanted. So that's why I'm building Precursor. To solve this problem exactly, it will help developers and builders automatically generate and maintain the context documents that make AI coding actually reliable. And instead of manually writing all this documentation, Precursor will workshop with you to create these structured contexts that AI tools need to understand your code and your patterns and your requirements. And right now we have an early access waitlist. Go ahead and check it out in the description below.
Yeah, absolutely. And like one of the other things that you may or may not see in a PRD is like style guides, right? And sometimes like that's separated out. It's its own thing, but it's a great example, right? Is like if you think about any sort of enterprise software, you're typically going to hire a designer, right, to actually
Right.
create Figma files that'll have every view. And that's great. I've used that a lot with different MVPs that I built and different companies that I work with. But there's a good and a bad side to that. And one of the things that I've seen as a front end developer is it's awesome to have a Figma file because it shows you exactly how to build a front end. But what's missing from that is a lot of the context of like how users engage with it, right? So like when a user hovers over something, what does that look like? It's not in a Figma file, right? Or when somebody clicks something, which view do they see? Or there's all these little things of like, how do these things get animated onto the page? They like swipe in from the side. You don't see that on a Figma file. And so I think one of the cool things about Cursor is that you can give it, this framework of a style guide and be like, hey, I want there to be, like a thin white border around cards or something like that. But you're not giving it a Figma file and locking it in. You're sort of saying like, you're really good at doing this. Like we already know that AI is really good at creating designs when given the right context. And so we just give it the information it needs to do its job. And that's actually how really high level business owners and entrepreneurs work, is like they don't try to nitpick everything. They hire people who are really good at stuff and they just give them the context. Yeah. Like if you think about Elon Musk, I think I heard this in the interview that you sent me the other day where they were talking about like Elon Musk when he started SpaceX. Yeah. He like hired the first like 300 or 3,000 people himself. Like he interviewed all of them. And it's because he wanted to make sure that he had the top of the top skills, right? The highest skill set people. And then he just told them the context of what he wanted. He's not the one engineering the actual rockets. And I think that's one of the biggest like misnomers that we have in business, especially in like the US and just this age right now, is that we idolize these people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and they're like, oh, he's so incredibly intelligent. It's not to say that Elon Musk is not incredibly intelligent. He is, but he's not engineering rockets. Like he's not doing that at all. He's not the one who's like, designing the seals that go on like rocket engines or something. He's employing really high quality people. And that's, I think, where context engineering comes in. Your really high quality employee is AI, but it's your job as the developer to provide the context so that it understands what it's doing. Because otherwise it's like hiring, somebody who read a book about rockets and being like, go build that SpaceX rocket, right?
That's a great point.
And it's like, you're not giving it great context. Like it needs that, right? We need to know what we're building in order to build it right.
And that kind of comes back to the whole context window. You only have, most of the time, like depending on which model you're using, you may have like 120,000 120,000 tokens, right, for the context window.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that all of the context in there is clean, pristine, like you're packing that window with the utmost clear context. So it's like this, I always call it like clarity and context, right? Like you need to have the utmost like clarity in your context documents, and the most valuable, because you only have a certain amount that you can pack into this window. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about, though, there's this other debate that I've heard a lot about, and it comes down to speed versus, between vibe coding and speed versus context engineering. And
Yeah.
for me, at least, when context engineering, obviously you have to plan a lot. You have to create these documents before you even coding. Vibe coding, you're jumping right in. But I've noticed that there is it's like the tortoise and the hare kind of, analogy or the story, right? Where you're slowly, you build up all these documents, but then once you have them, like, you're off to the races and you're gone. What is kind of your idea about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's this tempting side to vibe coding, and I think it's why myself and you and a lot of other developers get into it, is because you basically type in a prompt and then you watch as the chat window just pumps out code faster than you can even type. And there's definitely something like appealing. There's some dopamine release in that. There's like some, being able to see a UI get built in front of you, that's very tempting. And so I think that a lot of developers who are new to vibe coding tend to one-shot a lot of stuff and actual vibe code, because they get that dopamine hit so quick, right? Where you're like, oh, I just had this idea, and then all of a sudden it's there. And we've said this a lot, and I know this sort of terminology comes up a lot, where it's like it works well for small, simple apps, but as you add complexity, your code sort of turns into spaghetti, right? Where you just, everything gets mixed up. And to go back to what we were talking about before, I think this is where Primeagen sort of had it right, where he's like, that's great, you can build something simple quickly, but then when you start adding complexity, you're going to end up spending more time debugging and fixing things. And I know I've been there too, where I'm like, in this loop where I'm telling Cursor to fix something that it's almost impossible for it to fix, because there's too many things that are just mixed up, where it's like fixing one bug and creating another, and then fixing that bug and creating the same bug again, right? And it's like, if I just had my like sight on it beforehand and provided more context of like, hey, I want to handle this with, if you're familiar with React.js, like, I want to handle this with a context. I know I'm throwing these confusing terms out there, but like, instead of using state, right? I want to use context. That a lot of times could like fix huge problems down the road, right? Or use like server-side rendering instead of client-side rendering. That could fix huge problems down the road. But because they were just like saying, hey, just go build it, you end up getting, like, again, it's a tortoise and the hare. Like, you get far ahead really quick, but then you get stalled and you almost can't progress. And so I think with the context engineering, you don't get as much of that dopamine release in the beginning, where you're sitting there and iterating with an AI about the context. Like, it's asking you questions back and forth of like, hey, I'm talking about Precursor, but you can do this in ChatGPT or any other LLM that you want, essentially, where you have to prompt it then, right? It's not doing a lot of the work for you, but you're saying, I want to build this document, help me iterate on this idea. And then you're just going back and forth, and you're not seeing anything getting built, right? You're just seeing like your chat, and then all of a sudden you get a document out, and then you're like, cool, now what?
This is my prize. Basically, this is my prize. This is my prize. Like, you just interviewed me for 20 minutes trying to like get these questions, and my prize is this JSON document. Like, thank you.
Exactly.
There's no dopamine there.
Yeah. And so, but I think the real payoff is long-term, because the idea of building a full stack application is complex, right? There's the front end, like actual design of the front end. There's authentication, there's the backend database, there's business logic, there's, containerization potentially. There's all these different pieces that have to connect together in a really elegant way for them to work like seamlessly. Like, I remember when I first got into like technical development, you start seeing software in a totally different way, because before that, you're just a user and you're like, oh, why is this thing not working? Like, when you get like the tiniest bug in anything, you're like, oh, this page takes 3 seconds to load. And then you're like, when you're a developer, you're like, whoa, like whatever's happening behind the scenes is like
Right.
crazy that it only took 3 seconds, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, so I think, with context engineering, you're basically building out all of that framework beforehand so that when you pass it over to your AI editor, it's able to build not only faster than it would before, but more accurately. And I think there's a little bit of like a confusing misnomer with vibe coding where when you vibe code, you're just basically saying like, build me this, and you're not giving any context of what you actually want, right? A lot
Right.
of it's just sitting in your head and you're saying like, build me an app that does this. And then AI is going to make all these assumptions and spit out something. And most of the time, because you're just amazed by the fact that it spit out anything, you're just satisfied
Yeah.
with it, right?
Right.
It's not like, oh, the corners are not the right, whatever. So you get the point, but yeah, you're going to
And
say
that
something.
it really goes, it comes back to like, and I made a YouTube video about this, that I had just posted, and it comes down to, what are you doing? Like, why are you building apps? And I think most people
Hmm.
really need to ask themselves, like, what is the goal here? Like, is the goal to just throw something out there, or just to do something just to trash it? Or are you actually trying to build something? Like, are you trying to build an app where you can make money? Are you trying to build an app where you can change your life? Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, if you're just doing this for fun and giggles and you're just trying to make another 35th to do apps, sure, vibe code away. Don't even bother
Yeah.
with context engine. You're going to waste your time. But if you really actually want to build something usable that other people can use and maybe
Yeah.
exchange money, you know what I mean, for
I think
for
I
what
think
you
a good
actually
word
built,
I think a good word for that is meaningful. Like, do you want to build
meaningful.
something that's meaningful in the
That's a
world?
nicer way of saying it, I guess,
Yeah.
meaningful in the world where you
Yeah.
can actually get some value out of it. And it's software engineers are expensive. Like, they have very high salaries, right? So
Mhm.
as someone who's non-technical, being able to now almost hire, that's a very gray area. I don't even want to get into that. But being able to leverage almost like a junior engineer to
Mhm.
help you build this app for you, like, you better give it all the context you want and you will get something great. Like, we've seen this over and over. Like, the chat app
Yeah.
that I built, between context and no context, like, amazing, world of difference. Building on all the 3 or 4 or 5 different apps that we built out over the past couple months, like, having good context and knowing and planning, it's not sexy, but it will give you 10 times better results.
Yeah. You made me think of this. So I think the big difference between vibe coding and context engineering is sort of like this. In both scenarios, you have a senior engineer at your disposal, right? Like, imagine you have the best software developer in the world, like $500,000 a year senior software developer, because that's essentially what AI is, right? It's not really a junior. It's better than most people at coding,
Sure.
right? Um, but the difference is this: when you're vibe coding, you're basically taking somebody who knows literally nothing about software development, and you're saying you're going to choose what keys the senior software developer types, and they're not going to make any suggestions. Like, you're going to tell them, hey, I want you to build it this way. And they're basically going to be like, okay, and not use their own brain. They're just going to like type it well. Right. Whereas context engineering is sort of the opposite, where you're like, hey, I want this thing, but you're giving the senior software developer the option to choose or like give input of like, hey, maybe we should make this decision about this, or maybe we should choose this way. And it's not like the AI itself, like the chatbot is different in Cursor. It's really, you're doing that beforehand by using AI to plan, right? Because with vibe coding, there's no planning. You're just saying like, just go to town. And with context engineering, you're basically saying, hey, take a senior software developer and walk through every step of this, make and refine it, make sure it's like it makes sense and works together, right? Like there's certain things in software development that just don't work well together, right? Or they don't make
Right.
sense. Like I can't give you a specific example, but you can think of a million of
No,
them.
there really is. Like, at the end of the day, like why wouldn't you want to plan and find out all these edge cases before you
But
even wrote any code? Or would you rather find these edge cases when you've already burned through a million tokens and you now realize that you can't even go this route because technically it's not even possible for it to work.
yeah,
So now you have to start
or
over at the beginning.
yeah, or a worst case scenario is when you're in production and you have like real user data that's being leaked or,
Deleted. Like the Replit thing.
or
That's
deleted. Yes. I mean, there's a ton of scenarios like that too. Like you can think of, it's like, not just like user data being leaked, but like a user finding a way to get free tokens, or I don't know, like use your app for free, or there's just so much risk involved with vibe coding. And that's not to say that there's not with other, with context engineering, but you mitigate a lot of that, right? It's sort of like cybersecurity. Just because you hire a cybersecurity expert doesn't mean that your code base is impenetrable. Like I've talked to so many people who are like, yeah, our code can't be hacked. And I was like, that's the one thing you don't want to hear from somebody, like, is like, my code base can't be hacked. Cause then you're basically saying like, you definitely can't, like all software can be hacked. Even like, I forget what it was. I think it was Google like recently got hacked.
I think I did
and
hear
it's
that.
like, yeah. And all software is vulnerable. So, but we're trying to mitigate that risk and make, the process of building better than it is, right? Because at the end of the day, pure vibes can only get you so far.
That is very true.
Right?
That is very true. So where do you see like the future then of this, right? So we're very, I feel like we're very, even with vibe coding, even with, let's just call it AI assisted coding.
Okay.
We are so new at this. I mean, realistically, maybe like a year in where this has been, or even 6 months where it's been really popularized, right? With Cursor and everything. Where do you see this going, let's say in the next year or the next 2 years, I would say?
Yeah. I think what we're going to see actually is more structure around building structure. I know that sounds kind of weird, but like more what's the word for it? Like just how basically Google has a way of designing software where every person on the Google team understands like this is our process for building software. We're going to see more of that with AI and vibe coding, I guess you can call it at this point, but where there's going to be more, there's going to be more of Precursor and other similar softwares out there that help people build this structure before they go and code, because ultimately, one of the things that we have not really seen full on yet is all of the downside to vibe coding, and that's cybersecurity and, bloated code and not scalable code, things like that. It hasn't been enough time. I mean, let's be real. Like we met in April of this year.
Yep.
And that was sort of like only a few months after Cursor became pretty popular. Cursor's been around before that, but like it wasn't really that good until maybe like February, March, something like that. Maybe January is like when it started getting like, people were like, whoa, this actually can be really powerful. And so it hasn't even been a full year that like vibe coding has been like a thing. And
Sure.
so I think, to be fair, we're going to see a lot more around how do we make it better? How do we make this idea of vibe coding more structured, more maintainable, and something that I can't think of the word for it right now, but what I'm trying to say is there's more of a system that people follow for doing it.
Like a
right now, it's sort of like
approach is kind of like a systematic approach of how to do it, like a roadmap and a game plan of how do you get from point A to point D using AI as coding.
yes.
Is that what you're kind of
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, like I think right now, Cursor is this really new tool that is fun to use, right? And a lot of people, you can just download Cursor, pay your $20 a month, and you can just build crazy stuff. But there's no like, when you go onto Cursor, there's very little instruction about like how to do it. They're just like, here's the chat window, say something into the chat, and then hope for the best. And so I think we're tending towards people realizing the downfalls of it, right? It's not to say that it's not still great, but I think people are seeing like, okay, it only gets you so far. And so now I think we're going to go towards more of a structured approach where people realize like, when I go into Cursor, I'm not just going to speak into the microphone about what I want. I'm going to work through like building documents or have these documents built. I'm going to use Cursor how it's meant to be, right? It's sort of like VS Code, right? VS Code is a super powerful tool. That's what Cursor is built on top of. And you could just go in there and start typing away. But if you build the environment for your coding, you're going to get a lot more success out of it. Like if you install the extensions that you use or use snippets or use, code completion, things like that, you can just build faster, use like linting, right? There's all these tools that are out there to make VS Code better. Ultimately, all VS Code is a text editor. Right? You could really write software if you wanted to in Google Docs. Like literally, you could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And most
You
people
can.
don't know that. Like even
Yeah.
Notepad, that Notepad was the
Yeah.
original like IDE, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's basically it. Like you can use, if you wanted to, like you said, you can use Notepad or text editor to like write code in, but it's just not as good as using VS Code. And so I think that's sort of where we're going is, there's just going to be more of a systematic approach for people. And yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the future is really unknown, but if you could guess, like, what does your standard Chad bro, like software engineer, developer kind of look like, a year from now? Like, what kind of
Ooh.
tools are they using? How are they coding? Like, what are they doing?
That's honestly such a hard question to answer because I feel like at this point the world of software development has advanced so quickly. It's almost exponential at this point. Like I I haven't been a full stack developer for 10 years. Like I think maybe I've been doing software development for 5, 6 years at this point. But in that time, I've gone from like there being no AI assisted coding to people can build $10 million apps in 30 minutes, apparently. But it does feel like, even with like the newest release of like GPT-5, like I know there was a lot of backlash about that, but it is very powerful, right? And so it's really hard to say. I mean, I think I would love to see more people use vibe coding as a way to become interested in software development and then actually learn more about it. I think we may get to a point in the next 3 to 5 years where people are speaking into a microphone and it's writing machine code.
That would be
Like
pretty interesting.
I think we could get there. I mean, obviously, who knows if that's not going to work like in a browser per se, but maybe, I don't know. Like at the end of the day, everything's ones and zeros. So like maybe we can get there.
We could get there. I mean, they did just release, this is way off topic, but I just saw it. Like I think Nvidia just released a new machine, a new chip or something that you can buy. I think it's like $3,500, and it's basically it's a robotic brain that you can just install in a robot for $3,500, and it will.
Yeah, that's scary, bro. That's super scary.
It is. It really is. So you may not be that far off. It's almost like that viral video that went out too of the gibberish, whatever it was when I don't know if it's real. It could be fake. Could be real.
No, it's real. It's
right. I don't know if the video's real with the two agents kind of talking back and forth, but it very well could be, and it just goes to show like you're not far off. We could just be going back to the
Yeah.
Stone Age of machine code and just have an AI do it for us.
Yeah. The scary part to me is that at that point, humans can't really read binary, at least none that I know can read it pretty well. So then it becomes hard to have oversight over what's actually going on. And that's, that's starting to sound apocalyptic to me. Like there's like an AGI that can write its own code in languages we don't understand. And uh, but yeah, I think realistically, I don't think that any like Chad Bro non-technical person is going to be able to write really complex software anytime soon. I think that's a little bit ways off, if ever, because I think we've talked about this a long time ago, and I think this is a really important thing to remember: is that as humans, we have sort of all this inherent context into like the world around us, like what's going on. We're on a video call right now. This is how we act on a video call. We're sitting. We're whatever, right? We have all this sort of like built-in context to everything that we do, and AI doesn't have that. It can't read somebody's mind, is what I'm trying to get at, right? It can't read my mind when I type in a sentence and I say I want you to build me a snake app. It can't read my mind in the color of the snake I want, the background, how big the app is, how
It needs the context.
needs the context, right? So I think that's the biggest downfall. I guess downfall may not be the right word, but that's the biggest like hurdle, is that AI will never be able to read our minds. So it always needs some sort of human oversight. And I don't think that we're going to get to a point where there's like non-technical developers who can do that as well as a technical developer who already understands the underlying technology. And at the end of the day, so much of the world has already been built on top of old technology, even like huge government systems that still use things like COBOL and old technology.
Legacy.
That we
Yep.
Legacy, yeah. Like we can't break free of that. I think it would take a long time to break free of that, because so much is already built on top of that. Like you look at just WordPress alone, right? WordPress, I think still takes up, I don't know, like 30-40% of the websites on the internet.
Which is crazy. With the amount of Framer and all these other like low code, no code kind of things. That's amazing that WordPress still has that much of a hold on the internet.
And WordPress is basically PHP.
Right.
So like, are we going to be able to break free of that in 5 years? Likely not. Likely we'll still need developers or somebody who can understand the context of how to code with PHP, because AI can get amazing, but if there's not a human who can be like, that doesn't look right, or this won't work with that, AI is kind of useless. Now, I could be totally wrong. I fully admit that I could be totally wrong with that.
I don't think anybody really knows the future, and that's okay. That's kind of the exciting thing about it is we don't know the future. It's completely a wide open playing field. Anybody can do what they want to do. Anybody can be who they want to be. Anybody can vibe code or context engineer or whatever the mixture of that is,
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about it. That's really the beautiful thing.
And that's what I'm so excited about, is that I think this is a great opportunity for more non-technical people to get into technical development or to understand more of it. And I'm all about that, because I think software is one of the most creative avenues that is available to human beings. I think it is, this is one of the huge revolutions that's happened in human existence. It's just software, right? Like you think about the advancement in human beings since we wouldn't be able to be doing this right now without software, like, right?
That's a very good point.
And getting this out to people, like I remember as a kid hearing about how people thought like newspapers were scary because people didn't need to know the news that much, like that frequently. And now there's like this 24-hour news cycle that's nonstop. And I think, in some respect that's probably bad, but I think for all the bad things. There's so much good that's come out of software. And I'm personally really excited to see how people build with Cursor and how people use context engineering to like up level what Cursor can do. Because that I think is the biggest thing, is like Cursor is this like amazing tool that has so much flexibility, almost to its detriment, right? Where it can do almost anything amazingly, but without having the context and really fully understanding, it's almost just like spinning in circles or, So I'm just really excited to see how context engineering will change vibe coding in the future, because I think they're very interlinked. But context engineering is sort of the next big step in vibe coding.
I agree with you. I think vibe coding or context engineering is going to be the best step, or the next best step, right, from vibe coding. And for most of the people out there, I think it's a perfect time to be learning it.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you coming on, and that we can have these kind of conversations where we're going to be doing these conversations, me and Russell, every Wednesday. We'll be releasing a new video, different topics around AI coding, vibe coding, context engineering. If you want to stay up to date with all of it and everything that we kind of learn through our day-to-day, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But otherwise, Russell, any final words for everybody?
Just go out there and build some stuff, man. And we'd love to see what you guys are building too. So feel free to share like what you're building with Cursor. And I'm always like to see like how creative people are with Cursor and what they're building. So by all means, connect with us, share with us, and yeah.
I just had an idea. We should probably just build super quick. We should build like a place for people to share their projects. I don't think there is one, right? There might be. I might be wrong, but
we have a little showcase page on Precursor, but I think we should build like something
like
for people
I think that'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, just showcase your vibe coded projects. I think that would actually be really cool. Like, just put it out there. Like, everybody loves to build in public. So yeah, all right. Look forward to that then.
Yeah, right, absolutely. We'll have that for you next week. Definitely, Chris. Get on that.
Exactly.
Get your 4 Cursor windows open. All right. See you guys.
See ya.